Good evening, everybody. Hello.
Hello.
It's so good to be here tonight, to be here among friends, among neighbors, among people who understand that the work that we do, the work of democracy, the work of justice, the work of building beloved community, it doesn't end when you get into your car after a protest or a rally, and it's not going to end when we all leave here tonight. We're here tonight to honor and remember and recognize a man who understood that better than most. A man who knew that the arc of the moral universe is long. He also knew that it only bends toward justice when we put our shoulders down and push. We're here tonight to honor Congressman John Lewis. Now, John had a saying, and many of you may have heard it before. He'd say, if not us, then who? If not now, then when? And I've been thinking about that question a lot lately, because let me tell you something, this is one of those moments. You can feel it, can't you? There's so much uncertainty. There's so much anger and the sense that something fundamental is at stake. I don't know about you, but I'm pretty scared. And I'm just going to admit that right now. How about you?
Yes.
We're watching our institutions that we believed in, that we've had for 250 years come under attack. We're wondering if the America that we knew, the America that promised equality and justice and opportunity for all, if that America is slipping away. And we're asking ourselves, what can I do? How can we meet this moment? So tonight I want to tell you about some people that I've known or who I've been inspired by who have answered that question. People who heard John Lewis's call and said, I'll do it, and I'll do it today. The first person I mentioned might surprise you because it's not somebody you may have heard much about before. It's my mom. Now, she wouldn't call herself an organizer. She didn't have a title or an office or any staff. I grew up in a really tiny town with fewer than 1,000 people in it. The kind of place where everybody knows everybody, but somehow people still felt disconnected. My mom noticed something simple. Every so often, neighbors would put their stuff out on their lawns with a little sign up saying, for sale, hoping someone might come by and buy those things. But inevitably, by the end of the day, most of that stuff was hauled right back inside where it started. Does that sound familiar? We've all been there. So here's what she did. My mom had an idea. What if the whole town did their yard sale on the same day? So she went door to door. She collected $5 from every neighbor, and she used that money to buy an ad in the local paper. That was it. That was the first annual town-wide yard sale in my teeny tiny little town. You know what happened? Within a few years, people were coming from 3 states away to come to this tiny little yard sale. The local Tractor Supply store lent my mom a brand new bright green gator to use for free. And I thought this was absolutely the coolest thing I had ever seen. I thought that my mom was the most powerful woman that I had ever seen. From sunup to sundown on yard sale day, my tiny community was absolutely alive. She brought people together. She ended up raising money for the volunteer fire department. She built relationships that lived on far beyond that day. People looked out for each other because now we all knew each other. That's where democracy begins. Not in the halls of Congress, not in the White House, although it certainly matters there too, but you wouldn't know that by the current occupant. It begins with somebody willing to knock on a neighbor's door, somebody who's willing to believe that we can do something better together. I'm going to tell you about another person who answered the call, and I will say this not knowing what Congressman Kildee was going to share with us, and it's deeply moving now that I've heard his remarks. My friend's name is Brandon Wolf. Brandon was a survivor from the Pulse nightclub shooting. On what should have been a normal night out, he watched the people that he loved most gunned down by somebody filled with hate who was armed with weapons of war. Now, Brandon could have shut down, and he would have had every right to do so. He could have hidden away. No one would have blamed him. But that's not what he did. he decided to show up and he testified before Congress, before John Lewis himself, about that night. But here's the thing, he didn't make it about himself. Brandon talked about his friend Juan and how Juan loved Eurovision. Anybody else here love Eurovision? He would host an annual bracket like it was March Madness for Eurovision. He threw the best cocktail hours. He brought people together around this absolutely silly European thing. If you haven't seen it, there's also a great Netflix movie about it starring Will Ferrell. But when he told this story, he made Congress and everyone who watched his remarks feel the weight of who we lost. Because Brandon understood something profound, that every loss to gun violence is that heavy. And he knew that he needed to make others feel in order to find the courage to act. Brandon didn't plan to be an activist. He never wanted to be in politics, but he knew that silence wasn't an option. Today, he's the National Press Secretary for the Human Rights Campaign. And I talked to him about a year ago of what inspires him with his work and how is it that he doesn't get overwhelmed by the weight of everything that we're facing. And he said something that really stuck with me. He said, I recognize that right now I'm the one holding the baton. My job is to make sure that when I pass it to the next person, there are fewer people who might have to go through what I did. We can all do that. We can all hold the baton and do a little bit in the time that we are blessed to be on this earth. That's real leadership. That's courage. And that's what it means to turn pain into purpose. There's one more leader that I think about often, someone from right here in Michigan who spent life reminding us that democracy isn't something that we inherit. It's something that we fight for every single day. Judge Damon Keith was born in Detroit on Independence Day, July 4th, 1922. That's what I call timing, right? Born on Independence Day. He went on to become one of the most respected federal judges in the entire country. He served on the bench for more than 50 years and ruled in landmark cases that helped desegregate schools and housing in Detroit and across the country. He fought to make sure that civil rights weren't just promises, but real protections that you could count on. And in 2022, when an administration tried to deport immigrants in total secrecy, Judge Keith wrote one of the most powerful lines I've ever read. Democracies die behind closed doors. Just think about that for a moment. Democracies die behind closed doors. That's what he believed. He believed that sunlight and truth were essential, that public service means standing up for the Constitution even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. Like John Lewis, he understood that the law isn't a shield. It could be a tool to build something better. His life is a reminder that the work of civil rights isn't a chapter in our past, exactly like, I can't just call him Dan, I know he calls himself Dan, but Congressman Philly, exactly like Dan said. It's not in the past, it's something that we build and we're a part of and we are active participants in every single day. So that brings me back to John Lewis, the reason why we are all here. After the sit-ins, after the beatings, after Bloody Sunday, John knew that he had to turn activism into power and to use that power for change. He helped register thousands of Black voters across the South. He led the voter education project. He built coalitions that connected grassroots activism with real political power. And that's the important part, because I know that for a lot of us, politics is gross and politics is disgusting and politics is scary. Protests are great. They're a great way for us to find each other. They're a great way for us to find our voices. But if we don't turn activism into politics, into power, they're just group gatherings where we get to see each other on the air. Protest can spark a movement, and I don't ever want anybody to tell you that it can't. But power is what makes it real. That's what made John Lewis so effective, that he didn't give up on 1 inch of his values. He brought them with him. He carried the stories, the scars, the moral clarity of the movement, and he turned it into votes, into budgets, and into lasting change that we are all still reflecting on every single day. That's the work ahead of us. Not just to speak out, although we absolutely have to do that, but to stay in the fight long enough to make it something real. That's what good trouble means. It's about building power that can make things happen. It's refusing to settle for a soundbite or a news story when what people need is a government that actually works for them. Now let me be very clear. We are living in a moment when people are losing faith in the idea that government actually does work for us. Look, I get it. I understand the frustration. But John Lewis didn't march across that bridge for the symbolism, people. He marched because he knew that the right to vote and the power to use it could reshape this country for the better. Our job now is to carry that work forward, to keep organizing, to keep showing up, and to build a country where power doesn't just belong to the loudest voices in the room, but to the people who are willing to do the work, especially the daily work, the quiet work, the work that requires knocking on somebody's door and saying hello. That's the kind of leadership that I believe in, and the kind that I think that John Lewis showed us. It's the quiet kind, but that's the fierce kind. The kind that reminds us who we're fighting for and why we keep going even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. Don't get me wrong, it is really hard right now, right? It's pretty hard. I have talked to a lot of people when I got here today who I said, thank you for coming, and you said, I wish I didn't have to, but here we are. We're seeing attacks on healthcare, on food assistance for families, on reproductive freedom. We're seeing mass deportation forces unleashed by people in plain clothes with masks on who are kidnapping people right off of our streets who have done nothing wrong. Massive tax cuts for billionaires, so I guess they can continue to try to go to Mars for some reason, paid for by working families and our healthcare and our taxpayer dollars. So what do we do now? And how do we meet this moment? Earlier this week, President Obama addressed this exact question. And he said what's needed now is courage. That for a lot of us throughout most of our lifetimes, progress was moving in one direction. So it was easier to be on the right side of history when you thought that momentum was behind you. Well, now momentum isn't behind us, and it feels like we're stuck. But that is the time when we have to be courageous, to be willing to be uncomfortable in defense of our values, our country, and the world that we want to leave behind for our children and our grandchildren. We can't look for a quick fix or the political messiah. I know that so many of us want to find the next Barack Obama, the next shiny new thing, the next one person who's going to fix it. Well, here's the truth. No single person can fix it for us. So this is our task. It's on all of us to come together and to meet this moment by doing the work. That's what John Lewis showed us how to do. And I think he'd be the first to tell you that it's not going to be easy. And it's not supposed to be. But if we want to protect our freedoms, if we want a government that works for the people, not billionaires and special interests, then we've got to show up, dig in, and stay in this fight. Are you ready to stay in this fight? Because if not us, then who? And if not now, then when? After we no longer have a country? I don't think so. That's how we honor the legacy of John Lewis. By coming together to remember, by coming together to reflect, and then going out there tonight and doing the work every single day. Not just in words, but in actions. That's how we answer the call of this moment. And we do it together.
stand up for the right.